Hi, this is Andrew Davey at Nevada Ford, and we're here with Teresa Crawford, longtime gun violence prevention activist based in Henderson. Thanks for joining us.
All right. Well, I don't personally know anyone who was at the concert or personally affected. I'm enormously affected, but without having to battle individual grief, maybe those of us in the larger community are better positioned to support and advocate for the victims and their families, both our decedents and the injured. I just heard today that at least 48 are still in critical condition out of 130 who are still hospitalized, out of over 500 who reported to hospitals for injuries. And as we know, 58 deceased from 5 or 6 states, a few people from Henderson. This is our community. Tourism is the beating heart. The best thing we can do to nurture our community is to make it safe for those that we invite to visit. We have to make it safe to go to a concert and dance and have a drink and throw your cares to the wind and not have to be watching your back or discovering the exit. How can we make it safe? Obviously, we aren't doing enough. So we're here today to demand that our elected officials heed the will of the voters who passed question 1 to close the background check private seller loophole. Who knows if that would have prevented this? It doesn't matter. There's random gun violence that happens every day in this community. We have to keep illegal guns off the street. We have to keep guns out of the wrong hands. We have to protect women who are the most affected by domestic violence, homicides, especially with guns.
What was your first reaction when we learned that as of last night, authorities have collected 47 guns from the assailant, and so far we know at least some of them were modified. With things called bump stocks that can essentially legally convert semi-automatic weapon to function as a fully automatic weapon.
Exactly. Sadly, because I feel like I have to know something about guns, I'd already heard of the bump stock. To address the quantity, currently there's federal laws that limit the number of handguns that can be bought in a period of time. There's no federal law limiting numbers of long guns. The AR-15s, SK-47s, the long guns that are semi-autos that can accept 30-round magazines or drums or belt-fed, for long-term firing. And he apparently accumulated over 30 of them just in the last year from different gun shops in different states with no way of knowing that one person was accumulating an arsenal that could, storm a town. As far as the bump stock, bump fire mechanism, it doesn't turn it into an automatic, but it uses the gun's recoil to make the finger bump the trigger repeatedly, really rapidly. And the first videos I heard, I thought, well, that's not a semi. I was expecting to hear pop, 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 and then you hear the rat-a-tat-a like you're watching a war movie, and so I immediately started searching forums used by gun enthusiasts who mentioned that sounded like bump fire, and I looked that up. So that's legal in this state. It costs about $100, and with it you can shoot, as he did, has been analyzed, 90 rounds in 10 seconds. 90 rounds in 10 seconds. Think about it. I mean, let that sink in. There must have been, if you just do the math, thousands of rounds in the 11 minutes that the shooting lasted. Sheriff Lombardo said the shooter began at 10:08 and finished at 10:19.
Up until this week, Senator Dean Heller has had expressed support for legislation to make bump stocks more easily accessible. And at the state level, Attorney General Adam Laxalt, who's now running for governor, he, back in December, issued an opinion stating he did not want to enforce Question 1, the background check initiative that voters passed last year. What would you like to see in terms of our state level and our federal level elected leaders actually addressing the policy at the root of this problem?
Well, there's several, and it's two separate lanes, federal and state. At the state level, Sandoval vetoed background checks that were passed by the state legislature
Back in 2013.
Albeit with no Republican votes, but still they passed, representing a majority of the citizens who had voted for him, and he vetoed it exactly 6 months to the day after the Sandy Hook shooting. Really an unfortunate juxtaposition. We thought we were having a vigil on that day for Sandy Hook, but also watching. That was the last possible day he could veto, and he did a couple of hours before the vigil started. We could have had background checks between then and now. So that veto led to Question 1, which passed. And he and Laxalt together had decided, and it's kind of circular, Laxalt says Sandoval is against implementing, and Sandoval says Laxalt's against implementing, and now apparently there's going to be a lawsuit against them to implement the will of the voters. I just saw a New York Times editorial today that says there's no rational reason not to implement the will of the voters. Not to go into the weeds with it, but there are several states that have a dual background check system that's working just fine, and we can too. But they have to just stop obstructing it and work on implementing. That's at the state. I would anticipate. I don't know what's going to happen in the next legislature, but as a state, we have the right to make the bump stock device illegal. Those certainly, still be in circulation, but stop selling them. That's a possibility, I suppose. Yeah. They aren't that popular, but with shooters. But when in use, obviously, we do not want to see that. He still certainly could have, caused so much carnage from that elevation. But it was an automatic style fire that made it so much worse.
And then finally, what would you like to see, at the federal level? Because we've seen thus far in the past 4.5 years that even as some states have taken action to strengthen their gun laws, there's still federal law. And there's still issue of guns crossing state lines. So, what would you like to see from our congressional delegation in terms of action?
Well, what we're seeing from Jackie Rosen, Congresswoman Jackie Rosen, Congresswoman Dina Titus, Congressman Ruben Kuhn, and Senator Cortez Masto is nothing short of courageous, and also from some of our candidates. One of whom was here today, absolute courage and absolute specific commitment to specific legislative remedies to make our community safer. The representative for Dina Titus today read her statement. As we know, Dina participated in a sit-in with John Lewis at the Congress over this. So they remain committed, absolutely. They are in the minority, and until they aren't in the minority, probably no action. However, I heard today that Paul Ryan isn't going to schedule a vote on the SHARE Act, which includes deregulation of silencers or suppressors. That is true, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Will he try to schedule it at some other point? Don't know. We've lobbied our local legislators on it in hopes that if there is a vote, they'll vote no. And then there's the case of Dean Heller, who voted against background checks at the federal level in 2013 and believes that now is not the time to talk about gun violence.
So when will it be the time?
I believe the time was at the mass shooting before this one, or the one before that, or the one before that. It's already too late for 58 people came to our city.